It is no wonder that while in theory, we like the idea that leaders are made and not born, when the pressure is on, we default to the reality that we either need leaders who are born to lead or who were already made somewhere else. What if the paradigm could be different? What if we took a step back and got intentional about developing leader capacity around us? What if we took a longer term and more intentional approach to developing ourselves and the leaders around us? Like most things in our lives, doing the right thing, especially really important things, is not about shortcuts, but about a long-term commitment and intention. Why would it be different with one of our most important strategic agenda items? Intentionally developing whole and deep-seated leaders in our organizations. All right, I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the Wild Conversation, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake, and as we always say, for the sake of others. And today we're continuing our series on what executives are really talking about. And this week's topic is there are no shortcuts to lasting change. So what in the world does this have to do with what executives and CEOs are really talking about? And one of the most common conversations we have with the leaders in the organizations we serve is regarding their absolute necessity for developing leaders as fast as possible. They want to know, how do I develop leaders? And whether they are looking for a successor so they can retire, need first-level managers to lead teams in their growing organization, or they need to start over from scratch. They know their business won't thrive without incredible leaders, and often they look around and realize they don't have the people who are ready. This is just the common reality. And it doesn't matter whether it's a business or a not-for-profit, we see it all the time. And much of what I'm about to describe to you will be directed at leaders who are using our process to invest in their leaders. And that process, just so you know the fundamental framework, will include a monthly assessment, individual assessment, targeting the most important developmental areas in our growth as leaders, and a monthly conversation to share that awareness with others with whom you work. And then repeating that process year after year as leaders progress or get promoted and as leaders into new roles and as leaders come into the organization. So new people joining your team. And in much of this, I'm speaking to a leader who has made that commitment. But even if you haven't, like if you're not using our process, I think this may give you insight into your own learning or the development of other people and leaders around you. And in this, I promise to attempt to answer, why is this important? Most of you who know me know that I cannot skip over why. How long does it take to develop a leader? What to expect over a multi-year investment in leader capacity? And then the last thing, and the temptations you might feel along the way to take 2 steps back after making deep progress. So we're just going to get real about what this looks like, but it's about a multi-year investment. So when senior leaders use the WILD Toolkit, which is our system for whole and intentional leader development, and it's the system of assessments and an architecture of conversations the teams go through annually and regularly in a cadence. They know that investing in whole leader development for the long haul is one of the most important commitments they can make. They have now put a system in place to develop whole leader capacity across their organization, where every leader, manager, and maybe even every employee will have this powerful set of tools and architecture in their hands. And as they have been told, the toolkit is not based on popular leadership fads and is not training. It's not training, but is based on decades of research on what it takes to prepare a person to lead or manage others. And then putting these tools in the hands of their leaders and their employees and having them learn together in a monthly cadence throughout the coming years. I have to set this frame so you understand the context when I talk about multiple years, what we see changing in people and some of the things that you face. So, I mean, the reality is that a lot of the targeted outcomes that we see increasing are things like alignment, which is a big deal, learning and accountability. You know, what's funny is we talked forever about putting learning. put learning in the hands of our people so that they take personal responsibility. Well, what does it mean to actually do that is one of the things that we see happening. Team cohesion is increased because people communicate more fluidly. The culture changes. And then performance is actually enhanced. We've seen performance change. It's enhanced because every individual on every team will be seeing their impact on others. And that capacity increases performance. But here's what's interesting. We see those things increase, but why is leader development? I have to address this. Why is it sometimes painful? And here's why. Leader development is about an individual being willing to change personally. And there is no way around that for you or for the people in your organization. To develop true leader capacity is to learn from our mistakes, to work through the tough times, and to not only perform through them, but to learn to do better next time. And it's also an ongoing process that doesn't end. We often fail to develop the capacity in our people because we view them as problems to be solved and to move beyond, as opposed to a necessary long-term investment in their learning and growth. And for that reason, our leader development efforts start the day we open our doors, not the day we need bigger doors. We don't develop deeper leader capacity as we don't develop that capacity as long as the best measure of the success of our efforts is whether or not they liked that offsite we did. The effectiveness of our leader development efforts can only be measured by the change leaders experience, and change is often hard. But I got to describe you. So I use this term whole leader. What is that? A whole leader is a leader who goes first with a spirit of courage and sacrifice, who moves with purpose and intent, is composed under pressure, is committed to the mission of your organization, has accepted the invitation to learn throughout their lifetime, and is an inspiration to others around them. They are not perfect and are likely more keenly aware of their faults and failings than even the rest of us. They have the fortitude to stand well in the storm and know that they will not stand perfectly. Whole leaders are those who make us better because they're in the room. And whole and intentional leaders don't just happen, they develop. And if whole leaders are developed, how long does that development process take? That's the big question. And I'm going to tell you what my experience and what research, if you look at the body of literature around leader development, my best estimate is it takes 2 to 3 years to develop a whole leader, or at least to get them ready. We have to let that sink in. It takes 2 to 3 years to get a leader ready for that next move that will be important in their organization. And whether it's a person in the trades moving into a leadership role for the first time, a software engineer doing the same, or an executive whose direct reports are not necessarily responsible for leading leaders themselves, but they've got to develop that capacity, it takes 2 to 3 years to get them ready. And what this means is that leader development is an ongoing process. Whole leader development will only end the day your organization ends. And until then, it will be one of the most important jobs you have. And it must start with us. And when an organization commits to a systematic investment in doing this over the long haul, the question is, what happens? So let me break down this. So we're stepping, I think everybody's got this long-term view. You know where I'm going is I'm stepping back and saying, if we step back, what is it that happens? And here's what we see. In year one, this is very common. We call it the invitation to change their thinking. The invitation to change their thinking. And I mean that in 3 ways. First, new leaders will now realize they are leaders, or might be. They'll realize that's a thing. And your other employees might begin to entertain the possibility that they also may lead at some point. And they will begin to realize that being a leader is different, is fundamentally different from not. And that awareness is a big deal because the door is now open to a deeper conversation in later years, months and years. The second thing that occurs in that first year is that some of your people will have their minds blown away by the reality that they still have so much to learn regarding leading people. They just didn't know what they didn't know. And the third thing is this: some of your leaders will show evidence that they are not ready or willing to become the leaders they could be, at least not yet. And for many of your first time and more seasoned people, this will be the only moment in their lifetime where they've experienced an organization making this level of investment in them. I cannot tell you how many times a seasoned leader has said this to us, where were these conversations and where was this scaffolding when I was younger? I wish I had been handed a tool like this 20 years ago. And I'm not making this all about the Wild Toolkit, but it's like, this is what we see. The power of the Wild Toolkit, our way of doing this, is that it is based on research on the actual developmental journey of leaders, because it's based on the real experience of leaders. You won't have to convince people that their development in the areas it covers are important. Their experience will speak for itself. And for that reason, many of your leaders will be ready to push the gas pedal all the way to the floor. Like, they're just like, I can't believe this. However, when you begin to dig deeper with your people, some will likely resist that invitation and may even push back. Some of you have experienced this. As soon as you ask your leaders, or you're just your people, I'm just speaking about all of your people, to learn and grow, some will be on board right away, and some will resist. And their resistance may cause you to realize that you didn't have the right leaders in place yet. When you invite a deeper level of awareness, that's what happens. And in year one, that's common. And their thinking will also, I'm still on year one, will also be impacted by the new language they will have. Like, some people didn't have a developmental language. The power of that first months and year is that it provides your leaders with a common developmental language that will translate into a performance language. But that language will be based on how leaders actually talk and not on corporate speak that is only true for your organization. That common language and learning in that first year will give them a way to talk with each other about their development in ways that they never imagined. But here's the temptation in that first year. In the first year, we are often tempted to see our people as either leaders or not. You might feel hesitant to require your people to develop. Isn't that a funny thing? We are afraid to ask our people to learn and grow for the sake of themselves and others. It's possible that your most challenging people will be driving the resistance bus in your organization and impacting others, a bus they are probably driving that is causing other problems already. Do you hear me? It's just kind of this reality. If we avoid the temptation to pander to those who aren't developmentally ready, those who are hungry for development now are the main point. And the others will either need to leave, find another place to get ready, or accept your invitation. And investing in your most editable leaders and not pandering to the resistors is a long-term investment that takes guts. Your organization, let me start that over. Your organization cannot be run by the anxious and resistant few. If it is, your best people will eventually leave. Year two. What happens in a second year? Let's say we've done this for months and we're moving forward. We're continuing this investment. This is what we call the moment to practice new behavior. The second year through, things begin to change as their new way of thinking becomes a testing period, a time to try new things out. Some of you I've seen some of you who are friends of mine do this. This is where your leaders will begin to try out new ways of interacting with others based on the intentions they set in the first year. Your people will now have a common developmental language, as I said, that they speak to each other, and now they'll have the courage to go deeper. In year one, your people may not fully believe that you aren't looking over their shoulder and reading their feedback reports. This is something that's a part of our process. Is a manager can't look at what an individual does, because we know that if they were, it would change that person's results, right? They would communicate different things. In year two, they will begin to get more honest as they document their development and share it with others. This is where team functioning moves from basic good performance to exceptional contributions as teams discern their strengths, blind spots, calling, purpose, and alignment to the team and organization's mission of which they're a part. But here's the temptation in year two. We see this often. The temptation, especially at the start of the second year of a regular cadence of development conversations, is to make participation in the process voluntary. I get it. In the first year, you saw some of those who resisted participating in the conversations. We saw this, you may have seen this, dragging the rest of your people down. And the reality that you already know is true is that the leaders who are unwilling to develop and edit are likely causing problems in your organization in other ways. And some of those resistors might be high performers. And high performers who resist development, like taking ownership of their own development for the sake of others, are a double dose of danger. Their performance in the short term is attractive, but their long-term impact on the culture can be catastrophic. The temptation is to pander to these individuals who did not accept your invitation and only have those who are willing to participate involved. And the Wild Toolkit is not a box to check. Like any whole person development process is not a box to check. It's an intentional developmental rhythm. And are you willing to keep leaders around who are not willing to edit and to learn for the sake of others on their teams? And while a voluntary system can work, the highest performing organizations we work with have leaders who make development a part of what it means to perform. Making development part of what it means to perform. Okay, so we've been through this for 2 years. Let's imagine 2 years. It seems like a long time. That's nothing, right? It's just like a blink of an eye. And we're in this process. What happens in the third year and beyond? And we call this a deepening in identity. As you move through year 3 and beyond, you are now likely to have weathered the storm of your greatest leaders accepting the invitation to get ready, to develop a common language, and to intentionally consider the leader they could become. And you likely had some leaders leave who did not accept your invitation or move on to a place that was a better fit. You also had experienced yourself and other leaders getting more honest and developing more insight and actually practicing new behaviors based on their awareness of what leading others means. They likely began to use the basic principles of whole leader development to see those they lead in a more whole way. And after multiple years of putting development in the hands of your people, something truly inspirational and deeper occurs as your leaders begin to see themselves as leaders. And I don't mean that not in a gross way from their egos, not like that, but from a place of humility and conviction. Like this depth is an awareness that they have grown, understand themselves better, are more honest with themselves and others, and are more differentiated. It's also common in this period that they become intentional about developing the leader capacity in others. Can you imagine that? Like now they are fully developing others around them. But here's the temptation. What's the temptation, Rob, in year 3? The greatest temptation after 3 or 4 years of using our whole leader development process as your system for developing leaders, teams, and culture, like putting it in their hands and letting them talk about it, of your organization, is this: development fatigue. The temptation to move on to an old school, shiny object or latest book. And that is fine as an add-on. But the need for whole leader development and the importance of awareness regarding calling, purpose, personality, readiness, motivation, support, experience, and investments in others will never end. And if this process becomes a drag, it's likely because you've begun to present it as a training and not a personal development moment for your leaders and your teams. And I know this can happen, but fight that temptation. My team at Wild Leaders has used this process as our system for developing individual and team alignment for several years now. And if someone wants to join our team, they know that learning and development for them will work hand in glove with what it means to perform. It's not another thing to do. It's what we must do to perform at the highest level, whether your team or organization is small or large. So here's my wrap on this. As your leaders move through these changes in their thinking, behaviors, and identity, they will not be done learning, but they will be ready in a way that they have never imagined. Then the learning really begins. Development of whole leaders becomes an ongoing reality for your organization as successors are abundant. Imagine that. I got chills when I said that because I know some of the pain some of you feel. Gaps are filled. Tough conversations happen. Innovation and production are increased, and storms are navigated with poise and performance. Can you imagine that? I really do. I hope this becomes a reality for you and for all of us. So let's keep the conversation going and go where your shared wisdom takes you.